Uh, have you ever looked at a map of South America and
Yeah.
just pause for a second?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
I was doing this the other day, and it triggered this very specific nagging question.
Yeah.
Because you look at Brazil, right?
Right.
And it is this massive Portuguese-speaking giant. It takes up like half the
Yeah,
continent.
definitely hard to miss.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then it's practically hugging the rest of the continent,
Mhm.
Argentina, Colombia, Peru, and they all speak almost entirely Spanish.
Yeah.
You cross one imaginary line in the jungle, and suddenly the word for hello just changes.
It creates this incredibly stark contrast on the map.
It really does. And, it makes you realize that these lines aren't random. The fact that I'm speaking English right now,
Right.
or that someone in a specific part of India prays in a temple while someone in Japan prays at a shrine, none of that is accidental. It's not just human nature doing its thing randomly.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's actually the result of a very long, very messy, and often very deliberate historical game of movement. I mean, we treat culture like it's static, like it's just the background noise of our lives.
Right.
But it's actually this living, breathing thing that travels.
Exactly. And that is exactly what we are digging into today. We've got a stack of notes, articles, and source material from AP Human Geography, which I know sounds a bit dry, but trust me, it's not. And we are going to use it to unpack the mechanics of what they call diffusion.
Diffusion. Yeah, it's a great word. It sounds super technical, like something from a chemistry lab. But in this context, it's really just the story of how culture, language, religion, ideas moves from point A to point B.
And the mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. We want to help you, the listener, see the invisible lines that connect the world. We want to understand why a word spoken in London has a distant cousin in Berlin, or why certain religions travel across oceans while others just stay rooted in one spot.
It's basically about reading the map like a history book. And to do that, you have to start where the story starts, because you really can't understand the journey if you don't know the origin.
Which brings us to our first key term from the notes, the hearth.
Right, the cultural hearth.
Now, for anyone who hasn't sat in front of a literal fireplace in a while, give us the definition here. Why do geographers use that specific word? It feels very cozy.
It is cozy, but it's also very structural. Think about a traditional home. The hearth is the fireplace. It's the center of warmth, the center of cooking, the center of family life. Everything kind of radiates out from there.
Oh, I see.
So in geography, a hearth is the place of origin. It's the literal heart, where a specific culture or an innovation or an ideology is born.
So it's basically an incubator.
Exactly. It forms there, it concentrates there, and then if it's successful, it gets pumped out to other regions. And looking at the source material we have here, there are a few major hearths that practically define human history. These aren't just small towns, these are the engines of civilization.
The heavy hitters. Let's run through them really quickly because they set the stage for everything else we're going to talk about. The first one the notes mention is Mesopotamia.
The classic cradle of civilization, located right between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This is the hearth for some of the earliest written languages we have on record, like Sumerian and Akkadian.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's also where we see the beginnings of organized law and urban living. Basically, the whole idea of living in a city has a hearth right there.
And then moving east, you have India.
A massive cultural powerhouse. Geographically, you've got the Indus and Ganges river valleys acting as this incredibly fertile incubator. India is the hearth for Hinduism, Buddhism, and Sikhism.
That is a tremendous amount of religious influence coming from one single geographic zone.
It really is. It's arguably one of the most spiritually productive regions in human history. And then, of course, the Middle East, specifically the Levant and the Arabian Peninsula.
Hearth of the Abrahamic faiths.
Right. You have Judaism and Christianity originating in the region of modern-day Israel and Palestine, and then Islam originating in the Arabian Peninsula. So when you look at the globe today, you realize these massive world religions didn't just pop up randomly in 5 different places at once. They started in these specific hearths and then traveled outward.
And that traveling part is the actual mechanism of diffusion.
The notes make a distinction here that I think is really helpful for visualizing this, because there isn't just one way culture moves. There are basically 2 main mechanisms.
Relocation diffusion and expansion diffusion.
Let's break those down. Relocation seems the most intuitive to me. I mean, it's right there in the name.
It is. Relocation diffusion is completely physical. It is migration. I pack up my bags, I move from Paris to Quebec, and I bring the French language, my recipes, and my holidays with me. The people move, so the culture moves.
It's almost like a moving van.
Yes, a moving van for culture.
Perfectly put. If the people die out or leave, the culture leaves with them unless it has taken root locally. But expansion diffusion is trickier. This is when the idea itself moves, but the people might just stay put.
Sort of like a viral video.
Exactly like a viral video. A viral trend is the perfect modern example of expansion diffusion. One person shares it, 3 people see it, they share it, and suddenly everyone knows the dance or the catchphrase. The original creator didn't have to travel to everyone's house to show them. The idea itself just rippled through the population like a wave.
Okay, let's unpack this by looking at language specifically, because language is fascinating. It leaves such a clear trail. The geographers in our source material organize language almost like a biology chart.
It's a genealogy, a literal family tree. And just like your own family tree, it tells you who is related to whom, even if they don't look or sound alike anymore.
And at the very top of that tree, you have the language family.
Right, this is the macro level. A language family is a collection of languages that all share a common ancestral proto-language. Now, this ancestor is usually so old that it existed way before recorded history. We can't listen to a tape recording of it.
But we know it was there because of the DNA it left behind.
Exactly. We can trace the linguistic DNA through the roots of words and grammatical structures. And the biggest family, the one that really dominates the global map, is the Indo-European family.
The scale of this family is just wild. The notes say it stretches across Europe, parts of Asia, and the Americas.
It includes English, Spanish, Russian, Hindi, Persian.
Wait, pause there for a second. I think most people get that Spanish and English are related. But English and Hindi,
Cousins. Very distant cousins, but cousins.
that is hard to wrap your head around. The fact that the language we are speaking to each other right now shares a great-great-grandparent with the primary language of India.
It shows you how deep these hearths really go. They both branched off from that original Proto-Indo-European source thousands of years ago. Compare that to, say, the Sino-Tibetan family, which includes Mandarin. That's a completely different tree. If you try to find a common ancestor between English and Mandarin, you won't find one in the last few thousand years.
Okay, so we have the family level, but obviously I can't understand a word of Hindi, and I can barely order a coffee in Russian, so we need to zoom in. The next level down in the notes is the branch.
Right. This is where the connections become a bit more visible to the naked eye. Branches are subdivisions where the grammar, syntax, and vocabulary are similar enough that you can actually see the family resemblance without having to be a professional linguist.
The notes have a really cool way to illustrate this. Let's call it the table experiment.
I love this example. It clears up so much confusion about why learning a second language is super easy for some people and incredibly hard for others. So we were comparing 2 branches of the Indo-European family here, the Romance branch and the Germanic branch.
Okay, let's do the Romance branch first. This descends from Latin, right? The Roman Empire.
Correct. So this is your Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, Romanian. If you look at the word for table in Spanish, it is mesa. In Portuguese, mesa. In Romanian, masa.
You can see the pattern immediately. It's essentially the same word.
It's incredibly obvious. Now let's switch over to the Germanic branch. This includes German, Dutch, the Scandinavian languages, and English.
And the German word for table is
Tisch.
mesa versus tisch.
They sound absolutely nothing alike. They're structurally completely different words.
And this is why, despite English having borrowed a ton of words from French over the centuries, we are technically still a Germanic language.
Structurally, yes. English sits firmly on the Germanic branch. That's why a native English speaker might really struggle with the gendered nouns or the complex verb conjugations of Spanish. We're trying to hop all the way over to a different branch of the tree. Meanwhile, a Dutch speaker trying to learn English. They're just moving one twig over. The underlying logic is the same.
That makes a lot of sense. So we have families, we have branches, and then we get down to the really local flavor, dialects.
This is the micro level. A dialect is a regional variation of a single language. It's the same language, meaning speakers can still easily understand each other, but there are differences in vocabulary, pronunciation, or spelling.
The source material has some great examples here. Being from the U.S., this one is a classic debate. We're talking about the small flowing body of water you might have in your backyard.
Ah, yes. The Great Creek versus Crick debate.
Depending on if you're in the South or the North or the Midwest, that word changes. But if you say crick, I know exactly what you mean. I'm not breaking out a dictionary to translate it.
Exactly. Or take the international example from the notes, the elevator versus the lift. If you go to London and someone tells you to take the lift to the third floor, you aren't confused. You understand the concept perfectly. That is a dialect difference, not a different language.
It's kind of like the spice on the dish. The base ingredients are the same, but the flavor is entirely local.
That's a really great way to put it. And dialects are often the first thing to change or fade as media becomes more global, which is a whole other topic. But they are crucial for regional identity.
So language spreads out, branches off, and picks up these local accents over time. I want to pivot now to the other big cultural driver in our notes, religion. Because just like language, religion has rules for how it moves across the map.
It definitely does. And honestly, understanding those rules explains a lot of modern geopolitics. If you look at a map of world religions today, it can look a bit messy, but there is a clear logic to it.
The source material draws a very sharp line here between two categories. It talks about universalizing religions and ethnic religions.
This is the core distinction. If you remember nothing else from this deep dive, remember this. To understand where a religion ends up, you have to ask one question. Is it trying to recruit you?
So the universalizing religions are the recruiters.
In a sense, yes. Universalizing religions operate on the core belief that their truth is applicable to everyone, everywhere, regardless of their cultural background. They actively want to spread. They are missionary by nature.
Christianity and Islam seem like the clearest examples of this.
They are the absolute giants of universalizing faiths. Christianity spread from that hearth in the Middle East to literally every single continent, and it used every tool of diffusion available to get there.
Both relocation and expansion.
Both. You had missionaries physically moving to new lands, that's relocation. You had the conversion of kings and leaders, which then trickled down to their subjects, that's a type of hierarchical diffusion. And you had trade routes carrying the message. It was designed to travel. It wasn't permanently tied to the soil of Israel. It could be practiced in Rome, in Ethiopia, in the Americas.
And Islam is a similar story.
Very similar. It diffused from the Arabian Peninsula incredibly fast. It moved through military conquest, sure, but also through vast trade networks across North Africa and deep into Southeast Asia. That's why Indonesia has the largest Muslim population in the world today. It wasn't conquered by Arab armies. It was a massive trade hub. The merchants brought the faith with them.
Now, there is one universalizing religion that really surprised me when I was reading the notes. Buddhism.
Buddhism is fascinating because it's a perfect case study in what geographers call contagious diffusion.
Right, because it started in India, which is the hearth of Hinduism. But today, Buddhism isn't the dominant religion in India. It's dominant in East and Southeast Asia. Why did it move out so effectively?
You have to look at the market, so to speak. In India at the time, you had the Hindu caste system. It was socially very rigid. If you were born into a lower caste, that was it. That was your life. There was basically no social mobility.
And then Buddhism comes along.
And Buddhism says, actually, enlightenment is available to anyone, regardless of your social status.
That is a very powerful message.
It was completely revolutionary. It offered a spiritual solution that people were clearly hungry for. So it spread literally like a contagion away from its hearth and into China, Japan, Thailand. It adapted to those local cultures, but the core idea traveled because it was universally appealing. It didn't require you to be Indian, it just required you to follow the teachings.
Okay, so those are the universalizing ones. They want to spread. They have a message for everyone. What about ethnic religions?
Ethnic religions are the exact opposite. They are deeply tied to a specific group, a specific heritage, or a specific physical place. Generally speaking, they do not seek converts.
They are knocking on doors.
No, not at all. They are more about the idea of, this is who we are, this is our history. And the main example the text gives here is Hinduism.
Which goes back to why Buddhism left and Hinduism stayed.
Exactly. Hinduism is completely woven into the specific culture, geography, and social structure of India. The Ganges River isn't just a river, it's a deity. The caste system is structural. You can't just plop that complex social fabric into a completely different society in, say, 1500 AD and expect it to work the same way.
So it largely stays concentrated in its hearth.
Right. Over 90% of Hindus live in India today. When it does move, it's almost exclusively through relocation diffusion. So people from India moving to the US or the UK and bringing their faith with them.
And Judaism fits into this category too, correct?
Yes. Judaism is a classic ethnic religion. Historically, it hasn't sent out missionaries to convert the world. Its global spread is almost entirely due to the diaspora.
The scattering of the people.
Right. Forced migration, exile, movement for survival. Jewish communities exist globally not because they tried to convert the local populations in Poland or New York, but because the Jewish people themselves moved and maintained their tightly knit community.
So we have these languages branching out, these religions either staying put or spreading like wildfire. But we can't just talk about this in the abstract. We really have to look at the map itself.
The map is the evidence. It's where we can actually see the scars and the pathways of all this history we're talking about.
And sometimes those scars are pretty literal. We talked about English and Spanish earlier. The fact that English is the most spoken language globally, or that Spanish completely dominates South America, that's not just because those languages were catchy or super easy to learn.
No, not at all. That is the direct result of power. Specifically, according to our materials, European imperialism and colonialism.
The colonial factor.
It's massive. You simply cannot understand the modern linguistic map without it. The reason you have Germanic languages like English in North America and Romance languages in Brazil is because those were the colonial powers that planted their flags there.
They brought their hearth with them and imposed it on a new place.
They forced a diffusion. They made their language the language of law, of government, of trade. It became the lingua franca, the common language needed to simply survive in that society. If you wanted to do business in the British Empire, you learned English. It wasn't a choice, it was a necessity.
And they didn't just bring their language, they stamped it on the land itself. Which leads us to the concept of toponyms.
Toponyms, it's just a fancy geographical word for place names. But place names are like fossils. They tell you exactly who was there and who was in charge at the time.
I mean, if you look at a map of the U.S., New York, New Hampshire, New Orleans.
Or all the cities globally named Victoria or Georgetown or San something.
Yep.
These are clues. They are the colonizers essentially shouting, "We own this now." A place name claims ownership.
But the notes mention something really interesting happening more recently, a counter-movement that they call cultural reclamation.
This is a very powerful trend. For a long time, the map just reflected the colonizers' view of the world. But now, as countries assert their independence and their own identity, they are taking those names back.
And the specific example the source points to is in India.
Right. Most of us grew up seeing maps with cities labeled as Bombay and Calcutta.
Those are very British-sounding names.
Because they are anglicized versions, they represent a very specific era of British domination. But recently, they officially changed back to Mumbai and Kolkata.
Yeah, on the surface, that might seem like a small administrative change.
Yeah.
It's just swapping a few letters. Does it really matter that much?
Our sources argue that it matters immensely. Symbolically, it's huge. The materials frame this as a direct rejection of that colonial identity. It's a reclaiming of the local original hearth. It's the people saying, we define who we are, not the people who sailed here 300 years ago. It essentially wipes the lens clean.
It really makes you realize that a map isn't just a static picture of the ground. It's an argument. It's a snapshot of a historical power struggle.
And we are still right in the middle of that story. That's the most important thing to remember. Diffusion hasn't stopped. It's just changing speed.
So let's quickly recap this journey, because we've covered a lot of ground today. We started at the hearths, those beating hearts where culture is born, like the Fertile Crescent or the Indus Valley.
Then we traced the pathways, how language splits into families and branches over time. We saw why Mesa and Tish prove that English and Spanish sit on entirely different branches of the same giant tree, even if we borrow words from each other today.
We looked at the mechanics of religion universalizing faiths like Christianity and Islam that act like recruiters versus ethnic faiths like Hinduism that travel almost exclusively with their people.
And finally, we saw how history, specifically colonialism, locked these things into the map we see today, and how people are now starting to rewrite that map through cultural reclamation.
It really drives home the point that every time you speak or every time you look at a globe, you are actively participating in this massive web of diffusion. You are the end point of thousands of years of movement.
You really are. Every word you use has a history. Every belief you hold came from somewhere else originally.
So here is a final thought to leave you with. We talked about Mumbai reclaiming its name. We see this trend of local identity fighting back against the colonial past. But at the exact same time, we have the internet. We have a world that is more instantly connected than ever before.
Which raises a really big question about the future of diffusion.
Exactly. As we move forward, are we heading toward one singular global culture where everyone speaks some version of English and watches the exact same media? Or will we see the map fracture back into thousands of distinct, proud, local identities pushing back against that global wave?
That is going to be the central tension of the next century. Is technology the ultimate expansion diffusion that just wipes out local variety? Or does it give those local voices a platform they never had before? Can we have a connected global world that still respects and preserves its local hearths?
Definitely something to mull over the next time you open up your Maps app. Zoom in on your own town, look at the street names, see if you can spot the history hiding in plain sight.
There is always a story there if you know how to look for it.
Thanks for diving in with us. Catch you next time.